Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is, well, we're taking a truly terrifying piece of source material and extracting the underlying mechanics of why it gets under our skin so much.
Exactly. It's a fascinating one today.
Yeah, it really is. So we are looking at a narrative sourced from the archives of the YouTube channel called The Midnight Curator. The piece is titled Apartment 404 Was Never Supposed to Exist.
Right, which is just a great title.
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
And we're exploring this account of a remote worker who moves into a quiet, ancient four-story building, only to become entangled in, well, what can really only be described as a supernatural architectural anomaly.
Yeah, a glitch in the physical world, basically.
Exactly. So for those of you listening, we're going to break down exactly what happens when the physical boundaries of reality begin to overlap,
Yeah.
and how the digital world, specifically, the smartphone you probably have within arm's reach right now, becomes a tether to a dimension that just shouldn't exist.
Right, because today we're analyzing the anatomy of a parasitic space.
A parasitic space, I love that term.
Yeah, I mean, when we typically think of a haunting or like a paranormal event, we default to the idea of an entity invading our domain, right?
Right, like a ghost in the living room or, I don't know, a demon in the basement.
Exactly, yeah. But the framework we need to apply to apartment 404 is entirely different. The threat isn't an occupant of the building, the threat is the building itself.
Wow.
Or rather, it's a phantom environment that overlays itself onto the physical architecture. It operates like a predatory organism that baits, traps, and ultimately replaces its victims.
And it does that by exploiting human traits, right?
Yeah, two very specific human traits, actually.
Mm.
Our innate spatial curiosity and our absolute reliance on digital connection.
Which is just, it's so creepy. That concept of the environment being the predator, it completely changes how we have to look at the beginning of this narrative.
It really frames everything differently.
So our protagonist is a remote worker. They move into Unit 303 at the end of October. And they specifically choose this place because it's at the end of the third floor hallway, it's cheap, and it's quiet.
Which makes sense for a remote worker.
Right. When your apartment doubles as your office,
Hmm.
that space becomes your entire world. You develop a hyper-awareness of your surroundings.
Oh, absolutely. You notice every little thing.
Yeah. And the source material immediately hits us with sensory details that indicate something is fundamentally wrong with the physical space. Like, the hallways smell faintly of dust and damp wood.
Which is a huge red flag.
And the lights in the building consistently flicker for a second before turning on.
Yeah, those specific environmental descriptors are doing heavy lifting right from the start.
How so?
Well, a smell of damp wood in an otherwise dry, functioning building is, it's a localized olfactory hallucination. Or, more accurately, a dimensional bleed.
A dimensional bleed.
Right. It suggests a space that has been sealed away, a place where the air just doesn't circulate. But the flickering lights, that's the true mechanical tell here.
The flickering lights. Okay, unpack that for me.
So in the context of a localized dimensional anomaly, an electrical delay isn't just poor wiring, it represents an immense energy draw.
Oh, like it's pulling power to exist.
Exactly. Maintaining a parasitic overlay, a space that technically does not exist in our physical plane, that requires a massive amount of ambient energy.
It reminds me of the architectural uncanny valley.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, because we expect buildings to be static, engineered, mathematical constants.
Right.
A floor is a floor. A ceiling is a solid barrier.
Right. The rules of physics apply.
Exactly. When you flip a switch, the light turns on because the circuit is closed.
Mhm.
But those flickering lights act like, well, it's like a rendering engine in a video game that's struggling to load a massive corrupted file.
That is a perfect analogy. Yeah.
The system is glitching because there is a hidden strain on the processor. The building is struggling to maintain the mask of normal reality because it's simultaneously rendering this phantom fourth floor.
Exactly. The environment is under extreme stress, but the mask holds just well enough to draw the victim into a false sense of security, which brings us to the landlord's role in the setup.
Oh man, the landlord.
Yeah. During the initial tour, the landlord points to the ceiling of 303 and tells the protagonist, "Don't worry about the apartment above you, it's empty. No one has lived up there for years."
Such a classic horror setup line, but it means so much more here.
It does. We have to analyze the utility of that statement. Whether the landlord is an unwitting participant simply repeating a ledger fact, or, a conscious caretaker grooming new beat.
Wait, you think the landlord might be in on it?
It's possible. But either way, the psychological effect is exactly the same. Establishing that the floor above is vacant is a crucial primer. It ensures that when the trap is eventually sprung, the victim's baseline expectation of reality is shattered with maximum violence.
Right, because if you think someone lives above you, the sound of footsteps is just an annoyance.
Exactly. You grab a broom, you bang on the ceiling, you complain to management.
Yeah, but if you have been explicitly told and you firmly believe that the space above you is a physical void, then the sound of footsteps isn't an annoyance. It is an immediate existential threat. And the anomaly knows exactly how to pace this. The protagonist moves in, and for the first 2 nights, the apartment is dead silent. I mean, there is no anomalous activity whatsoever.
Which entirely mimics the behavior of complex ambush predators.
Really? Like what?
Think of a trapdoor spider or an anglerfish. The trap requires the victim to let their guard down. The first night in any new environment, the human nervous system is on high alert.
Oh, for sure. You hear every single creak.
Right. You're listening to the settling of the pipes, the wind against the glass. You are actively scanning for threats. If the anomaly initiated contact on night 1, the victim's flight response would trigger immediately.
They just pack up and leave.
Exactly. So by allowing 2 nights of perfect silence, the anomaly establishes a baseline of normality. It allows the victim to calibrate their senses to the silence.
Making the eventual intrusion impossible to ignore.
Precisely.
The system lulls you into accepting the corrupted file as the safe default state. And then on the 3rd night, that false sense of security is completely dismantled.
Night 3 is where it all escalates.
Yeah. At exactly 2:03 in the morning, the protagonist wakes up to the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps directly above their bedroom.
Step. Pause. Step.
Exactly. Someone or something is walking back and forth across the floor of the empty apartment. And the source material highlights that this goes on for almost a full minute before stopping dead at 2:34 a.m.
The transition from silence to targeted sound at that specific hour, it's highly calculated.
Why 2:30 a.m. specifically?
Well, at 2:30 a.m., the human brain is typically in its deepest phase of REM sleep. Waking someone abruptly from that state induces a natural cognitive fog, right? A vulnerability where logic is easily overwhelmed by primal fear.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you wake up and you don't even know what year it is sometimes.
Exactly. Furthermore, we need to look at the progression of the physics involved here. Footsteps are, essentially, passive sound.
Passive sound. What do you mean by that?
They're the acoustic byproduct of mass interacting with gravity and friction. It is eerie, given the space is supposed to be empty, but it is not inherently aggressive.
Okay, that makes sense.
The anomaly is testing the water, checking to see if the observer below is perceiving the intrusion.
Right, and the protagonist's brain desperately tries to cling to logic. I mean, they lie there in the dark, trying to rationalize it.
Doing what we all would do.
Exactly, thinking maybe the landlord rented the unit out that afternoon. Maybe it's an emergency maintenance worker. But then the acoustic profile changes in a way that just shatters any rational explanation.
The dragging sound.
Yes. The slow footsteps are replaced by a heavy, agonizing screech. The sound of massive furniture being dragged across the floorboards.
That shift from passive walking to active dragging completely changes the dynamic. Dragging a heavy object requires deliberate intent and immense physical exertion.
Right, you don't just accidentally drag a couch across a room at 2 a.m.
Exactly. It implies a struggle, or the intentional rearrangement of an environment. We are talking about a physical exertion of weight and force in a space that fundamentally lacks mass.
Which is terrifying.
It is. The anomaly is simulating the acoustics of friction to escalate the psychological pressure on the victim below.
And it builds to a climax that strips away any remaining deniability. The dragging stops. The heavy silence returns for just a moment. And then, directly above the protagonist's face, there are 3 distinct, light taps on the floorboards. Tap, tap,
Tap.
the hierarchy of knocks.
The hierarchy of knocks.
Yeah, we have moved from the passive byproduct of motion to the active exertion of force, and finally to deliberate communication.
Oh, wow.
Random house noises, settling wood, expanding pipes, they do not occur in a rhythmic, repeating sequence of 3. This is a targeted interaction.
It's talking to them.
Yes, the phantom space is actively reaching out across the dimensional boundary, announcing its presence and demanding to be acknowledged by the observer.
Let's ask you, the listener, put yourself in that bed for a second. You're lying in the dark, staring at a ceiling you were promised is the floor of an empty room.
Pitch black room. Yeah. You have just heard someone pace, drag a heavy object, and then kneel down and tap on the floor inches above your nose. I mean, at what point does your reliance on the physical laws of the universe just break? You can't logic your way out of 3 deliberate taps.
You really cannot. But physical sound alone, even something as terrifying as deliberate knocking, is still an external phenomenon.
Right.
A terrified human being can always choose denial. They can pull the covers over their head, clamp their hands over their ears, and simply wait for the sun to come up.
Just wait it out.
Exactly. If the anomaly wants to truly hook its victim, it needs to bypass the physical architecture of the building entirely. It needs a mechanism of invasion that the victim cannot ignore.
Which brings us to the digital tether.
Yes.
This is where the narrative shifts from a traditional architectural haunting into something deeply modern and invasive. The protagonist is frozen in bed, processing those 3 knocks, when their smartphone buzzes on the nightstand.
The timing is incredible.
It really is. It's a text message from an unknown number, and the message reads, "Did you hear that?"
The infiltration of the digital sanctuary is a masterstroke of psychological manipulation.
It's so violating.
It is, because we construct physical barriers, right? Doors, locks, ceilings, to keep the unknown out, but we willingly carry our smartphones past every single one of those defenses.
Right to our bedside tables.
Exactly. By utilizing a text message, the supernatural threat completely circumvents the physical geometry of the building. A ceiling offers 0 acoustic or physical protection against a cellular signal.
That is such a good point.
The anomaly has reached directly into the palm of the victim's hand.
And the synchronization of the physical and the digital is what seals the trap. The protagonist reads the text message, and the very second they finish reading the word "that," the entity upstairs knocks on the floor again.
Louder this time.
Louder this time. And instantly, the phone buzzes with a second message from the unknown number. "I live upstairs."
That precise synchronization eliminates the victim's ability to dismiss the event as a hallucination or a coincidence.
You can't just pretend it didn't happen.
No, because the physical manifestation of the knock and the digital delivery of the text are flawlessly aligned. It forces the victim to accept a horrifying new reality. Whatever is occupying the impossible space above them is also inside their personal network.
The correspondence that follows is a real-time unraveling of spatial logic. The protagonist texts back, "Yes, that's your apartment," assuming the person texting is the one making the noise.
Which is a logical assumption.
Right. But the unknown number replies no. The protagonist, totally confused, asks what they mean, and the unknown number clarifies, "My apartment is above yours."
We are now entering the spatial paradox.
Yes, let's get into this.
The anomaly is forcing the victim to confront the impossible geometry of the trap.
Let's map this out for everyone listening, because the geographic impossibility is the core of the horror here. The protagonist lives in Unit 303. They are on the 3rd floor of a 4-story building. By the most basic laws of architecture, the apartment directly above them must be Unit 403. So the protagonist types out the logical defense. There's no floor above you.
Because there shouldn't be.
Exactly. And the unknown texter replies, "That's what I thought too."
A shared realization of entrapment. Just chillin'.
So the protagonist asks for the person's apartment number. The reply comes back, 404. But the protagonist knows the layout of the building. They walk the halls. If they're in the 3rd unit on the 3rd floor, 303, the corresponding unit above is 403.
The math is simple.
Right. A unit numbered 404 does not exist in the physical blueprints of that building. When the protagonist points this out, the texter delivers the line that defines the entire narrative. They text, "There wasn't when I moved in either."
Oh, that line. That single sentence redefines the entire nature of the threat. There wasn't when I moved in either.
It's so good.
It confirms that apartment 404 is not a physical construction of wood, copper, and drywall. It is a conceptual prison.
A conceptual prison. Explain that a bit more.
It is a localized dimensional pocket that manifests over the existing reality. It overrides the physical blueprint of the building, inserting itself into the architecture only for those unfortunate enough to perceive it. It fundamentally changes who the protagonist is talking to. This isn't a ghost. It's a previous tenant.
Yes.
It's someone who moved into the building when it was perfectly normal, just like the protagonist did. They signed a lease, they unpacked their boxes, and somehow they fell into the overlay. They slipped through a crack in reality and became trapped in a space that physically cannot exist.
And we must recognize the mechanics of how the anomaly is using this previous victim. The person trapped in 404 is acting as unwitting bait.
unwitting bait. Like, they don't know their bait.
Exactly. Their desperate desire for human connection, their need to reach out and warn someone, is being weaponized by the parasitic space to establish a link with the new resident in 303.
The horror just doesn't stop with the vertical impossibility of the phantom floor either. The narrative immediately introduces a horizontal overlap that shatters the concept of shared physical space. This part is so intense.
It really is. While they are texting, the protagonist hears the floorboards in the hallway outside their own apartment creak. Soft, heavy footsteps are echoing through the third-floor corridor. Someone is walking toward Unit 303.
In the physical world.
In the physical world. The footsteps stop right outside the protagonist's locked door. The protagonist is holding their breath in the dark, and then the phone buzzes. The texter from 404 sends, "Did someone just stop outside your door?"
The anomaly is now using the digital tether to confirm the physical horror occurring in real time. It is triangulating the terror.
Triangulating the terror, the protagonist texts back, "How did you know?" And the reply from 404 is, "Because they just walked past my door."
This is the hallway convergence. It is the most vital piece of evidence for how the dimensions are interacting.
I need us to pause here and really dig into the physics of what that text message implies. How can a physical entity be standing motionless outside Unit 303 on the third floor while simultaneously walking past the door of Unit 404 on the phantom fourth floor?
It implies a state of dimensional superposition.
Superposition. Okay, break that down for us.
So the spatial barrier between the physical third floor and the conceptual fourth floor has thinned to the point of absolute transparency. The dimensions are bleeding into one another, occupying the exact same physical coordinates.
They're occupying the same space.
Exactly. Whoever, or whatever, is navigating that hallway is simultaneously traversing both realities. The physical corridor and the phantom corridor have collapsed into a single point of overlap. The entity exists in both spaces at once.
It's like taking two different maps of a city drawn on transparent paper and laying them perfectly on top of one another. The streets intersect in ways that defy physics.
That's a great way to visualize it.
But just as the protagonist is trying to process this impossible geometry, the texter in 404 introduces a nested nightmare. The texter sends another message. "I think someone else is up here." The protagonist asks, "Up where?" And the texter replies, "The floor above me."
The introduction of the apex predator.
Wait, hold on. We have to push back on this mechanic because this breaks the rules we just established.
Let's hear it.
You just told me that this parasitic space operates on an economy of attention. It requires an observer to render the phantom environment. The building is only 4 stories tall. We've accepted that 404 is a conceptual pocket dimension superimposed over the existing 4th floor.
Right.
But now you're telling me there's a 5th floor, a floor above the fake floor. If the protagonist in 303 is the observer rendering 404, who on earth is observing the 5th floor to allow the apex predator to exist?
It's a valid question.
How can a nested dimension render if the person trapped in 404 is too terrified to even look at it?
That is the exact paradox we need to dissect. To answer that, we have to apply the principles of the double-slit experiment in quantum mechanics to macroarchitecture.
Okay, you're going to have to walk me through that.
Gladly. In quantum physics, unobserved particles exist in a state of probability, right, a wave function, until an observer forces them to collapse into a definite state.
Right, Schrodinger's cat kind of stuff.
Sort of, yeah. If we apply that to this parasitic space, the 5th floor doesn't exist as a permanent physical structure. It exists as a wave function of pure predatory intent.
Pure predatory intent.
Yes, it doesn't need to be visually observed to render. It forces its own existence into reality through acoustic violence. It demands observation through sheer force.
The acoustic violence, you're talking about the shift in the knocking.
Precisely. Up until this point, the man trapped in 404 has been using a very specific auditory signature to communicate. Tap, tap, tap.
Light. Desperate.
Distinctly human. It's the sound of someone asking for help. But when the entity on the nested 5th floor interacts, the sound profile completely shifts. The ceiling of the phantom apartment shakes, and 3 massive, deafening blows echo down through the building. Bang! Bang! Bang!
Just brutal.
Ah.
The trapped texter in 404 immediately sends a frantic message. "They just knocked on my ceiling."
That violent acoustic signature establishes the food chain within the anomaly. The man trapped in 404 is not the master of this domain. He is simply digested material.
He's just bait.
He is just as terrified of the massive banging entity above him as the protagonist in 303 is of the entire situation. The entity utilizing the bang, bang, bang is the true architect of the anomaly, or at the very least, the apex predator of this localized ecosystem.
Wow.
It doesn't need the victim in 404 to observe it visually. It asserts its reality by physically assaulting the conceptual boundaries of the trap.
It is the sheer weight of that acoustic violence,
Mm.
combined with a genuine human concern for the person trapped in 404, that forces the protagonist's hand.
They can't just stay in bed anymore.
No, they can't. The footsteps in the hall were real, the synchronized texts are real, the massive banging is real, the protagonist is compelled to investigate. They transition from a passive victim cowering under the blankets to an active participant in the anomaly. They unlock their door and step out of Unit 303 into the hallway.
Which is the exact behavioral response the trap was designed to elicit.
It got exactly what it wanted.
The bait has been taken. The digital tether and the acoustic terror have successfully maneuvered the prey out of their secure location.
The source material provides a brilliant methodical description of the geography of the trap as the protagonist moves toward the stairs. The building is entirely silent again. The dim yellow lights in the third-floor hallway are flickering softly.
Again with the flickering lights.
Exactly. The carpet underfoot is described as worn and faded, bleeding the color out of the environment. Every single step the protagonist takes echoes disproportionately loud in the quiet building.
The physical environment is subtly guiding them, funneling them toward the epicenter of the anomaly. And it is crucial to note that the digital tether remains actively engaged during this physical transit.
Yes, as they are walking down the hallway, the phone in their hand buzzes again. The texter in 404 asks, "Are you leaving your apartment?" The protagonist stops, looks at the empty hallway and texts back, "How do you know?" The reply is immediate, "Because I can hear your footsteps."
The spatial overlap is continuously validated.
It's like they're walking together.
Yes. The victim is physically walking on the third floor, but their acoustic footprint is being perfectly tracked from the conceptual space directly above them. The anomaly's sensory network is flawless.
So the protagonist reaches the end of the hall and begins to climb the old wooden staircase to the fourth floor. And the source explicitly notes a distinct atmospheric shift. The higher they climb, the colder the ambient air becomes.
A classic sign of energy drain.
When they reach the fourth floor landing, the hallway is significantly darker than the one below. Only a single overhead light is functioning, and it is flickering with a slow, agonizing rhythm.
This connects directly back to our initial analysis of the electrical draw. We are seeing the physical cost of the anomaly.
The cost of running that phantom floor.
Exactly. The energy required to maintain the illusion of the phantom floor to bridge the gap between the conceptual and the physical is immense. This results in the localized drop in thermodynamics, the cold air, and the failing electrical grid. The closer the protagonist gets to the actual boundary of the trap, the more the physical reality degrades.
The protagonist walks down the fourth floor hallway. The doors they pass are perfectly normal, labeled in standard brass numbering, 401, 402, 403. But then the hallway abruptly terminates. Where the door to Unit 404 should logically be, there's nothing. It is just a blank expanse of drywall covered in old, peeling wallpaper.
This is the threshold. This is where the absolute power of perception in a parasitic space becomes the primary mechanic.
The protagonist is standing alone in a freezing hallway, staring at a blank wall, and their phone buzzes. The texter asks, "Are you outside my door?" The protagonist types back, "There's no door here, it's just a wall." And the reply from 404 is instantaneous. "Yes, there is."
This is where we must deeply explore your earlier analogy regarding video game rendering engines.
Right. So in a complex video game, the computer doesn't render the entire world all at once because it would crash the processor.
It would be way too much data.
Right. It utilizes a technique called occlusion culling. It only renders the specific textures, objects, and geometry that the player's camera is actively looking at. If you turn your character around, the world behind you is unloaded from the computer's memory.
It literally ceases to exist in a rendered state.
Exactly, until you turn back around and focus your attention on it.
That is the precise physical law governing apartment 404. The parasitic space operates on an economy of attention. It cannot waste the massive amount of energy required to manifest a physical door into reality until a conscious observer is present, focused, and willing to interact with it.
So it's just waiting for them to look.
Yes. The anomaly requires a cognitive handshake to bridge the final gap between dimensions. The door literally does not exist in the physical plane until the protagonist's perception demands it.
The interaction protocol that follows is incredibly tense. At the exact moment the texter insists the door is there, something on the other side of the blank drywall knocks. 3 light taps.
Tap, tap, tap.
The texter messages, "I hear you too." The protagonist, operating purely on adrenaline and confusion, slowly raises their hand. They press their knuckles against the blank, painted drywall, and they knock back. Tap, tap, tap.
The physical handshake protocol is initiated. They've acknowledged the boundary. They knock on the wall, and the conceptual space recognizes the observer. The circuit is connecting.
The phone buzzes. The texter sends a simple instruction, try the handle. And only then, only after the auditory interaction and the digital instruction, does the physical environment alter.
It renders.
It renders right in front of the protagonist, protruding from the flat expanse of old wallpaper where absolutely nothing existed a second prior. A small, tarnished metal door handle manifests into physical reality.
The observer's focused attention has forced the anomaly to render the entryway. The bridge between the physical hallway and the conceptual prison is complete. The handle is the physical manifestation of the victim's consent to interact.
But as the protagonist slowly reaches their hand out toward this impossible handle, their phone buzzes violently. It's a final, desperate message from the trapped man in 404. It says, "Don't open it."
A fascinating psychological contradiction within the trap's design.
What do you mean?
Well, the trapped man is the mechanism of the bait, right? Compelled by the anomaly to lure the protagonist upstairs. But at the final critical moment, his human empathy overrides his systemic function. He realizes what is about to happen and tries to abort the sequence.
He tries to save them.
He does.
The protagonist, their hand hovering inches from the metal, texts back, "Why not?" There's an agonizing pause before the reply comes through, because that's how I got stuck here.
It is a devastating confession, but it arrives too late in the sequence.
Protagonist, terrified, asks, "Stuck where?" The answer is, inside 404. They ask how long the man has been trapped in there. The reply is chilling. "I don't know anymore."
And that's when it happens.
Yes. The moment that text is delivered, the physical environment reacts. The single failing hallway light flickers violently and dies. The corridor is plunged into pitch darkness for a full second. When the light setters back on, the metal handle protruding from the drywall has moved. It is slightly depressed. Someone on the other side of the wall just put their hand on it.
The trap has achieved self-sustainment.
Self-sustainment.
Yeah. The physical interaction of the protagonist knocking, combined with their visual acknowledgement of the handle, provided the phantom room with enough localized reality to operate its own internal mechanisms. The observer has given the anomaly the power to open itself.
The phone buzzes one last time. "Did you touch the handle?" The protagonist, backing away from the wall, texts, "No." The reply from 404 is immediate. "Then who just did?"
This is the critical escalation. The man trapped inside 404 is not the one opening the door.
The metal handle slowly turns downward all the way. The blank wall seamlessly fractures, opening a few inches inward. A wave of freezing, stale air pours out into the hallway. The source describes the smell as suffocating, the exact scent of a room that has been hermetically sealed for years, untouched by time or airflow.
A localized pocket of dead time leaking into the active world.
The texter inside begs through the phone, "Close the door." But before the protagonist can react, a hand shoots through the narrow opening. It is described as impossibly thin, pale, and shaking violently. It grips the edge of the drywall and pulls the impossible door wide open.
The reveal.
And suddenly the protagonist is standing face to face with the trapped man. He is pale, emaciated, and looks like he hasn't slept in weeks. He locks eyes with the protagonist, his own eyes wide with shock, and he asks a single trembling question. "You can see me."
We must analyze the mechanics of that specific question.
Yeah.
You can see me. It is not an expression of relief.
It's not.
No, it is the linchpin of the entire supernatural ecosystem. It confirms that the anomaly operates on a strict principle of thermodynamic and conceptual equivalent exchange.
Equivalent exchange.
Right.
The protagonist, frozen in shock, slowly nods and whispers, "Yes." The transformation in the trapped man is instantaneous. The sheer panic drains from his face, replaced by a profound, selfish relief. He exhales and whispers, "Good, then I can finally leave."
This is the ultimate, inescapable rule of Apartment 404. It is a closed-loop system. It requires a conscious observer to act as an anchor.
An anchor, like a battery.
Exactly like a battery. Think of it as an electrical circuit that must remain closed to function. The conceptual room cannot maintain its form without a human mind to power it, to experience it, by making eye contact, by affirmatively validating that they see the trapped man. The protagonist has unwittingly accepted the transfer of the anchor.
They took his place just by looking at him.
Yes. They have signed the conceptual lease. They have become the new battery for the anomaly, and in doing so, they have severed the previous victim's tether, allowing him to slip out of the conceptual space and back into true physical reality.
The trapped man steps forward, crossing the threshold straight through the doorway, passing the protagonist. He is standing in the physical hallway. He is free. But the very second he crosses that boundary, the atmosphere shifts violently, because something deep inside the pitch-black void of that hidden room begins to move.
The apex predator enforces the terms of the exchange.
The source describes it as a massive, heady shape-shifting in the absolute darkness of the room. The escaping man freezes in the hallway. He slowly turns back to look at the open doorway, and all the color drains from his face. He starts backing away, whispering, "No, no, no." And from the depths of the black room, that same deep structural violence echoes out. Bang, bang, bang.
The entity from the nested fifth floor, it is demanding its replacement. The system will not allow the previous battery to leave until the new battery is fully installed within the containment unit.
This brings us to the dark reversal, and it is a staggering betrayal. I want everyone listening to deeply consider the emotional devastation of this moment. The escaping man looks at the protagonist. His face is twisted with panic and guilt, and he says, "You shouldn't have answered the messages."
The ultimate realization of the groomer's guilt.
Think about the cruelty of that. The protagonist thought they were being empathetic. They thought they were communicating with a fellow victim, trying to solve a terrifying puzzle together. They left the safety of their apartment because they were genuinely concerned for the person trapped upstairs.
Right, they were trying to help.
But in reality, from the very first text message, did you hear that? The protagonist was simply being groomed. Empathy was the vulnerability the anomaly exploited.
In a parasitic ecosystem, empathy is a fatal flaw. The anomaly utilized the previous victim's absolute desperation to manufacture the lure. And when faced with the demands of the apex predator, the previous victim's survival instinct completely overrides their human empathy. It is the rawest form of self-preservation.
The escaping man lunges forward. He grabs the protagonist by the shoulders and shoves them violently toward the open doorway.
Wow.
He throws the protagonist into the void to ensure his own escape. The protagonist stumbles forward, crossing the threshold, falling into the freezing darkness of the hidden room. Instantly, the door slams shut behind them with a deafening crack.
The circuit is closed.
The protagonist scrambles to their feet and turns around, but there is no door handle. There is no outline of a frame. The hallway is gone. There is only a blank, seamless expanse of darkness.
The transition is complete. The protagonist has fully entered the conceptual prison. The dimensional overlay has solidified its boundaries around them, and their connection to the physical world has been completely and irrevocably severed. They are now the anchor.
The final sequence, detailed in the source material, is the ultimate insult to the protagonist's reality. They are standing in pitch darkness. They are trapped in a space that doesn't exist. Somewhere in the shadows of the room, a massive entity is slowly shifting its weight, and their smartphone, still gripped tightly in their hand, lights up the darkness with a single buzz.
The digital tether remains active, but its routing has been updated. The network acknowledges the new architecture.
A text message appears on the glowing screen from the same unknown number they've been talking to all night. The message reads, "Welcome to apartment 404. But it doesn't end there. A second later, another message appears directly beneath it. A simple, horrifying status update. Someone just moved into 303.
That final message perfectly encapsulates the dark, cyclical efficiency of the anomaly. The biological machinery of the trap does not require a refractory period.
The cycle is instantaneous.
Precisely. The parasitic space has consumed its prey. The moment the protagonist is successfully contained within the boundaries of 404, the system resets its external parameters. A new victim, fresh bait, has already been loaded into the physical apartment below. The space has fed, the battery has been replaced, and the hunting cycle immediately begins anew.
Let's synthesize the mechanics of what we've unpacked here. The environment weaponized its own architecture. It began with sensory manipulation, the smell of damp wood, and the flickering lights of a struggling rendering engine.
Right.
It used 2 days of perfect silence to establish a false baseline of safety. Then it introduced targeted acoustic invasions, footsteps, dragging friction, and deliberate knocks to spark spatial curiosity and primal fear.
Building the tension perfectly.
Crucially, it utilized the digital tether, invading the victim's smartphone to bypass the physical geometry of the building and force the victim to confront a spatial paradox. Finally, it weaponized the victim's own empathy, culminating in a violent one-for-one supernatural trade governed by the laws of equivalent exchange.
It is a flawless execution of psychological and dimensional manipulation. The physical building was never the threat. It was simply the canvas onto which a highly evolved predatory concept projected its hunting ground.
And as we close out this deep dive, I want to leave the analysis with you, the listener.
Mm-hmm.
We've explored the mechanics, the quantum overlap, and the psychological betrayal. But the implications of that final text message require one last, terrifying consideration.
Yes. I want you to deeply consider the reality of the protagonist's new existence. They are now the permanent resident of the Phantom Apartment 404. They are standing in total, freezing darkness. Their only company is the massive, unseen entity on the impossible floor above them, communicating its demands through violent, deafening bangs on the ceiling.
It's just bleak.
They hold a smartphone connected to a closed, anomalous network, and they know, based on that final text, that an innocent, unsuspecting person has just unpacked their bags in Unit 303 directly beneath their feet. The question is not how the trap works. The question is how long it takes for human endurance to break. Stripped of light, stripped of hope, and subjected to the relentless terror of the apex predator, how many days or hours will pass before our protagonist turns on their glowing screen in the dark, finds the number for the new resident below, and types the words, "Did you hear that?"
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of nightmares. Keep your devices close, but perhaps think twice the next time a notification syncs a little too perfectly with a strange noise in your house. Until next time.